Food is key to our climate. Food systems are responsible for 1/3 of all global greenhouse gas emissions. At the same time, over 10% of the global population still goes hungry, while 1/3 is malnourished. The world's biggest challenge is to produce and consume food without polluting air, water, and soil, and without wasting it. This can only be achieved if we take a holistic look at the world's food systems. Food systems include more than the basic elements of how we get our food from farm to fork. They entail all the processes, infrastructure, and tasks related to feeding the world population, including the recycling of organic nutrients.
Production and consumption are interrelated. Tastes change over time, particularly with increasing income. This ripples back through food systems and affects retail, marketing, distribution, processing, all the way to what is produced. What we choose to eat depends on food prices, what we're used to, our social, educational, cultural, religious, and traditional background, our knowledge of nutrition, advertising, and availability, which is determined by environmental and political factors, or simply by what producers and retailers believe they can sell.
Over the last 20 years, the world population has grown by another 30%, or 1.6 billion people, which of course means that more food is needed. To meet the growing demand, agriculture has been widely mechanized and intensified, which has boosted agricultural productivity. This development has made food cheaper in many regions of the world. This sounds promising, but the focus on expanding food production has had ecological consequences, like the degradation of soil, depletion of water resources, and a dangerous loss of biodiversity. Wasteful behavior and bad management means that as much as 1/3 of the food is lost or wasted. And there is a social and health aspect, since around 3 billion people can afford only cheap and unhealthy food.
The most abundantly produced staple crops, such as corn, soy, wheat, and rice, are highly subsidized and traded, while other crops are edged out and are often underfunded. Of the more than 6,000 different plant species that are cultivated for food, just 15 account for 90% of the world population's energy intake. This is even more dramatic when it comes to livestock. Poultry, beef, buffalo, pork, mouton, and cheval account for 97% of global meat production. Meat consumption has grown considerably in the middle and upper income countries over the last decades and accounts for an estimated 14% of all greenhouse gases.
Climate change affects everything, from the air we breathe to the food we eat. The length of growing seasons, the availability and quality of water and soil, and topography also determine food production. Biodiversity is critical for the global food security and essential for a healthy, diverse, and nutritious diet. Disturbed weather patterns with ever longer periods of rain and drought, a hot spell or a cold snap at the wrong time, or weather extremes like flooding and storms can have devastating effects on sensitive crops and put millions of people and their livelihoods at risk. This can destroy economies, create widespread unrest, and prompt migration. These risks can be stemmed through the transformation towards environmentally, economically, and socially sustainable and resilient food systems. This means strengthening locally adapted territorial food production and consumption. This can improve rural livelihoods and the resilience of people and communities. But transformation depends on what people choose and can afford to eat and what is available on the market.
As we have seen, consumption triggers production and vice versa. All this calls for setting the right incentives for moving to more sustainable food production methods and consumption behavior. Reducing greenhouse gas emissions is imperative for saving our planet, which is only possible if we change our eating habits. Healthy planet, healthy people. What can international cooperation contribute? This and other questions will be at the center stage of our discussion. Let's join hands to find innovative local and regional solutions to meet this global challenge. Together, we can do this.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Work session 1, healthy diet for a healthy planet. My name is Christina, and I'm going to be your moderator today. When I'm not here, I'm with Swiss Food Nutrition Valley, which is a non-profit organization where we work across all sectors towards planetary and people health through a sustainable food system. Good. So I would like to make a special welcome to our online audience. You also have a special online host, Florian, with you today, and he will be chatting with you secretly, which none of us here in the room will know about. So you have an advantage there. Now, that was a heavy movie, huh? I mean, the silence fell in the room and the grave faces come out, but hopefully we'll have a bit of fun as well. Before we start, I would also like to know who you all are, and hence, please play along and bring out your phone, or you can also do it on your laptop with typing in slido.com and using the IC Forum code to enter. You need to choose work session 1 once you get in there. Oh, I don't even need to tell you what to do. You're up and running. That's great. So we want to know who's here today. This is both online and in the room. And we see we have a lot of governmental representatives in one way or another, non-profit organizations, some people from academia, private, and a lot of others. Thank you for that. The next one, when you hear the healthy diet for a healthy planet, where do you position yourself here? So we have 1 out of 5 are confident say, I'm an expert. That's good. We'll test that later. Most are here to explore, shakers and movers, and we're moving on. So what do you want to get out of it today? Be inspired. That's lucky, because that's on my briefing too. The objective of today is to leave you inspired. However, for the 1/3 who wants to go straight into action, that is also something we're hoping for. Yeah. And then finally, we're a little bit curious about how the meat consumption is looking around the world. And as we see, I'm sure this would have been a very different picture 7 years ago when the Sustainable Development Goals were launched. A lot of people have barely had any meat the last week. And a few are very honest, say pretty much every day. Good. Thank you so much for sharing that. We will now talk a little bit about what you can expect over the next 2 hours. As I said, our objective is also indeed for you to get some information downloaded here, but we would also like for you to interact. So here's how you do it. When you listen and get inspired, you lean back, whether it's home, in the home office, or it's here. And when you interact, you lean forward like you did just before and engage with the Slido and also questions for the panels. We want you ideally to leave and put this new knowledge into new actions, meaning the dream is actually you will go away from here with your pocket full of seeds to plant projects and solutions for a sustainable food system. We have a heavy program. I doubt anybody will need coffee, not have time for it either during the next 2 hours. First, we will have a keynote speaker who will talk to us about the food system, a part of the 2030 agenda, and also about the United Nations Food System Summits last year. And we will talk to or meet a couple of countries who will show us what that looks like when it's put into practice. Then we shall all travel on a field trip to Tanzania with a live transmission and see what's happening out there in the field, see how the market is doing and the consumers are doing and how they're interacting. And finally, with the help from a super fantastic panel, we will further explore the links between empowering the consumers to do what's right here and everybody else around it in the food systems. Good, but before we start with this program, I would like to test those 20% of you who said you are absolutely experts on this. Yeah? And also those of you who said you were explorers or would go back and do something. Hence, please bring back Slido, everybody. Good. So, 4 questions. Are you ready? The first one is, and this is important, I need to say, put a comment to it because you might misunderstand, and I see some of you have, I don't know if you can change your answer actually, but here we're talking about kilocalories. We're talking about hunger. We're not talking about access to nutritious, safe food. That's another number. We're talking about kilocalories. And if you listened, the first 15 seconds of the movie, you would have heard. So, yeah, that's more like it. You are right, the majority. I think the 20% should have gotten this one right. It is, in fact, a little bit more than 10% of the world's population who do not get their daily kilocalories intake, which they're supposed to do. Now, if we talk about nutrition and safe food, it is indeed 25% where a lot of you were before. Good. Moving on to the next question. Which food type produces most greenhouse gases per unit weight? So weight 1 kilogram of this given food product. I love this. You're all wrong, except those 7% who chose the lamb. Yeah? So it is indeed the lamb that produces more meat than the others. Now, I'm not saying everybody stop eating lamb, because if we look at it, from lamb consumption per each one of you, it's around 8 kilograms of greenhouse gas emissions, and when your beef consumptions get counted, it's 120 kilograms for each one of you. So accumulated, beef is worse, but if you just choose between a beef and a lamb steak, the tallest dwarf is the beef, or how to say it. But, so, good, something to learn. You already learned something, yeah? Next one. And here I also need to put a footnote. Here we're talking about the highest obesity rate amongst the candidates here below. Where do we find that? In which part of the world do we find the highest obesity rate? And yeah, you are right here. You are right. It's like me against you, isn't it? It is indeed in the Americas. Now, if we looked at the whole world, and I got a little bit curious here, so I went in and looked at the top 10 countries of obesity levels, and they were all beautiful Southern Pacific islands, like Palau and Micronesia and what have we not. There, the obesity levels ranks between 50 to 65%. Yeah, so. But indeed, between the bigger regions, that's it. The final question, food, waste, and laws. If we were to scatter it over a land, in land use, which landmass would we cover to here? And this also takes, a bit of geography to know how big these countries are. The correct answer is Mexico. So I'm sure you all know that we do waste 1/3 of all the food, and the majority of that is actually safe for consumption, and we could eat it. And one thing we need to reflect on is that if we solve that, we have solved, a big majority of all the other problems we have through a food system. And on a little side note, I cannot help it, living in Switzerland, being Swiss and Danish, we are the black sheep of Europe when it comes to food waste, yeah? And it's not because we want to. We love the nature, we leave only foodstuffs, but we have too little knowledge of the impact of every time we leave half a plate in the restaurants. Good. Okay, so my conclusion here is, you know a lot, but you also have a bit to learn. So let's proceed with that. And what better way to proceed with that than having a keynote speaker coming and join us here. Just to set the scene, as I mentioned, 2015 we set down the Sustainable Development Goals. And since then, and probably with a crescendo last year in September 2021, we have acknowledged that the food system, what we produce, how we produce it, where we produce it, how we transport it, pack it, and not least waste it, is a big, big part of the solution. And we saw it at the United Nations Food System Summit, and I'm happy now to welcome here on stage Peter Messely. Peter is the director of the Wyss Academy for Nature, and he's the professor for sustainable development at the University of Bern. And Peter, please come up here. Let's give Peter a hand so he gets really motivated.
Thank you. Great, thank you very much. It's really a privilege to set the stage today for this interesting session. And I basically gave it the title, if we get the slides, I have to remember it, Transforming, yes, just transformations of food systems for implementing the 2030 Agenda. And I would like to start out with a picture where Rockström left off with this marble, the Brühl marble picture, which actually has the same age as I do. And not only have I changed, but also the planet has changed. We know there are twice as many people living there, and the economy globally has grown by factor 30. And I think it has been a huge success of science in those past 15 years to show us that we have been pushing this planet over these boundaries, which has become this existential threat to humanity. And it has also been a success that we have defined those bold goals, be it for climate or biodiversity and the SDGs. But if we turn to implementing those goals and turn to the right side and we turn to reality, then we see that these goals are closely interlinked to each other. They're also interlinked to human well-being and to claims. And everything, I must say, seems negotiable. Even the Amazon is negotiable, ultimately. And I think it's on that background that we have to understand those are these wicked problems that we try to solve, and we need to find new approaches to overcome this gap between knowing and doing. And I think how to implement the 2030 Agenda was also a question which in 2016 the UN member states asked to a group of scientists, and that was the group that edited this Global Sustainable Development Report that you see on the left side, basically saying what is the science perspective of how to implement that. And I would like to share some of the insights of our work. And I think the first thing we asked, what is the current state of knowledge? All these reports that we have, what do they tell us about the interactions between single SDGs? And you see here a matrix, 17 times 17 SDGs, and you see in blue colors everywhere where you have evidence of a synergy or a co-benefit. When you do something for one SDG, you'll have a co-benefit on the others. And in red, you see the trade-offs. So if you take the second row and the SDG 2 and say, let's just fulfill SDG 2 by ramping up the food system that we have, you'll see a lot of blue. You will do, you will create jobs, you'll do something for the health, you will lift people out of poverty and many more things. But you have major trade-offs, as we heard in the film. You'll probably use 50% more agricultural land, and you will increase 90% more CO2 emissions. So these are really huge dysfunctionalities that we need to handle. But they're not only problems around that, there are also potentials. And you see here there are positive feedback loops. For example, if you achieve sustainable agriculture, you'll do a lot to conserve ecosystems, which in terms leads to resilience to climate change, which in turn again reinforces sustainable agriculture. And I think this is key. We have to stop thinking of the agenda as ticking boxes, as a sum of what we achieve, but we have to move and understand it as a multiplication. We have to still think systemically how we can trigger those I would say, virtuous cycles, because this is the key to move from linear to exponential change. And this is the acceleration we so urgently need to make change happen. Good. So on that basis, our report proposed in 2019, when we submitted it to the General Assembly, basically 6 entry points for such systemic changes where we feel there is a potential to go ahead. And you see different topics, but very prominently, of course, food systems was one of the key proposals where we said we need to act. And of course, we are extremely happy to learn when the Secretary General in 2019 called for a food systems summit in 2021, which really paved the road towards this new change and to the summit. And of course, we all know there was a second summit as well, but I think that's a different story, not for today. Good. So if we really want to transform food systems, what is the key? What are the levers to change that? And from our studies, we basically said, you have 4 levers. You have governance, you have economy and finance, you have individual and collective action, and you have science and technology. Well, you may say, this is totally trivial. Yes, it is trivial. But again, it's not trivial because these levers have to understand that they are a means and not an end, that they are contributing to a purpose, which is the transformation of food systems. And behind these levers are the key actors and the power holders. And many don't want to have this purpose. Many don't even want the transformation. So it is really a very political topic to negotiate, to influence those actors to put in the purpose of transformation. And this game has not been won yet. But of course, then, in the run-up to the Food System Summit, we saw those 5 action tracks, and we saw 2,200 ideas coming together in 56 solution clusters, and a wealth of innovative ideas. And I tried to map some just examples here against the food system, from production, as we heard it, all the way to consumption. So there is a wealth of innovative ideas which can help us move along, and which really also makes me optimistic that there is space for action. But how can we really, use this potential? How can we bring it to fruition? And that's perhaps my last input here. Oops, yeah. First, I think we need to recognize that food systems are totally different from one place to another. And if you would look out, if there was a window to look out, you would see the Geneva place, and you would perhaps imagine China. And they are different in terms of the priorities and problems, but also of the opportunities. And of course, that means it is contextual. And I really like this slide here by O'Neill, where we see all the countries here shown on the x-axis, where we see how many planetary boundaries a country transgresses. And on the y-axis, we see how many social thresholds have it achieved. So it's basically the donut model. But what I really think is interesting, on the left top corner, that's where we need to move. That's where the Agenda 2030 is, to have social thresholds without transgressing boundaries. And you see from this graph, the distance to target is the same for every country almost. That's my first insight. The second insight is every country has to go a new pathway. We don't know that pathway is how to go it, and it's different from one country to the other. And the green one, the old one, to grow first and clean up later, we know we cannot use that anymore. And so for me, that means that these countries, they have to find pathways, and I would say pathways are the context-specific combination of levers towards the universal goal of food system transformation. And that means leaving no one behind doesn't mean only an issue of fairness and equity. It also means we need every country to be competent and capable to choose its own pathways. Otherwise, we all lose. So that's the first point of pathways. And the second point, these food systems are not independent one from another. They're highly globalized, and we live in a hyper-connected world. Choose any indicator of flows in the world, from information to goods and capital or people. They have all grown exponentially in the last 30 years, and we live today in a different world. So it's not astonishing that these levers are highly connected and they're intertwined with each other. And it's obvious that there is a power issue as well. You know that, for example, in trade and in beverage processing, the top 10 companies control about 90% of the whole market. So what does it mean? And the question, what does international cooperation do? I think we cannot claim that international cooperation in bilateralism or multilateralism has grown exponentially. Quite the contrary. So what could be the key roles? I believe they have a role to play in helping each other to be the public sector, to really facilitate the dialogue and give this journey the purpose, to have an equitable dialogue, what the purpose in each context is, and countries need to help each other. But I also think international cooperation has a role to play in these connections. They cannot be absent and just support the economic sector. They have to see that we can change the rules of the game, that we have a level playing field in this territory, which is often lacking the rules of the game. And that means just transformations as the main task. I'm coming to the end. May I make a conclusion? Again, to the big picture. And I think we have understood that this planet will depend on food systems, and food systems will make a difference for this planet. And I really see three main challenges. We have heard them: the environmental crisis, inequalities, and dysfunctional systems. But they're connected. I think environmental crisis and inequalities are connected, and you could call for climate justice. I put here the slogan, leave no one behind. Or if we move to the right, if we understand that the environmental crisis cannot be solved by treating symptoms, we need systems change, not climate change. We really have to change these systems. So my question to you is, do you really believe in these slogans? Have you believed it in 2015? Do you believe it now? Let's be honest. If we don't believe it, we're somehow becoming associates of a global elite, which basically says we're just moving on our journey. Perhaps, hopefully, our kids can still benefit, but it will go across the abyss one of these days. And what would that mean for the role of the global Western world as being a model? And what does it mean for facts and science if we are part of an untruth ourselves? So I ideally hope that we can say yes to those two slogans and make the connection between leaving no one behind and system change, which for me means just transformation. And that is the main mission, I think, of international cooperation. And I hope we have the courage to pursue it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Peter. And we will have the opportunity to see Peter again later in our panel, where you also will have the opportunity to raise some questions. But remember, just transformations. Now, what does that actually look like, what Peter talked to us about, and these intertwining patterns? More than 100 countries sign up for food systems transformation pathways after or during the United Nations Food System Summit last year. And another 50, they made commitments. We will now bring to us here two countries where we'll talk about their pathways and how they look. The first country is Senegal. And Senegal are looking into the opportunity of becoming self-sufficient in their rice supply to the country. And with us, we will have, it was recorded last week, our friends from the Swiss Agency of Development and Cooperation had an interview, and they will give us here the extract, and that is Mr. Yonossa Mabalo, who's the national coordinator of Prevail in Senegal, and especially a special counselor of the Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Equipment. Let's hear what he has to say.
Du succès de la transformation vers des systèmes alimentaires durables pourrait être fait selon quelques indicateurs. Le premier indicateur, c'est vraiment en quoi en quoi on a renforcé la sécurité alimentaire et la nutrition par donc une augmentation de façon concrète de la production. Une production vraiment respectueuse de l'environnement et de la qualité des produits agricoles. Ça, c'est un premier indicateur pour nous de mesure vraiment de la transformation vers des systèmes alimentaires. Le deuxième indicateur, à notre avis, c'est que la transformation du système alimentaire doit se traduire pour nos pays, surtout par la création de richesses et d'emplois. Le Sénégal, vous savez, s'est engagé résolument dans la construction de systèmes alimentaires durables avec l'élaboration d'un plan qu'on appelle le plan Sénégal émergent. C'est un cadre de référence de la politique économique et sociale du pays. Et c'est un cadre qui a été élaboré depuis 2014. Le PSE, donc c'est le résumé de plan Sénégal, l'abréviation de plan Sénégal émergent, a retenu le secteur de l'agriculture comme parmi les secteurs à fort potentiel de croissance. Les atouts du Sénégal, je pense d'abord c'est sa stabilité politique. C'est un pays traditionnellement vraiment connu pour être un pays démocratique où il n'y a pas eu de coup d'État comparé à d'autres pays donc, africains, et il y a une vraie pratique de la démocratie. Ça, c'est important. Cet environnement politique me semble très, très important et c'est un atout. Le deuxième atout, c'est de plus en plus l'émergence de partenariats publics-privés. Il faut surtout aussi encourager tout projet lié à la transformation des produits agricoles. Nous, on dit dans notre pays, et certains trucs, qu'avant de produire, il faut penser à la transformation et il faut penser aussi à la commercialisation. C'est des aspects importants. La mise vraiment en place d'instruments ou d'infrastructures de stockage, d'infrastructures permettant de transformer les produits localement, etc., cela nous semble extrêmement important. Dans 10 ans, nous pensons que, les acteurs des différentes chaînes de valeur seront très bien sensibilisés. Tous les acteurs auront tous la bonne information, la meilleure information pour pouvoir donc vraiment s'adonner à leurs activités. Donc d'où l'idée que, en tout cas, il faudra toujours que dans 10 ans, que tous ces acteurs soient bien formés et informés. Le deuxième point sur lequel je voudrais revenir là-dessus, c'est que le système de production, que ce soit des productions végétales, des productions d'élevage, ces systèmes tous seront des systèmes agroécologiques intensifiés. C'est-à-dire qu'il faut faire une production agroécologique, mais il faut aller aussi dans le sens, dans ce processus d'une production vraiment de qualité, mais en quantité également.
Just reminding everybody what Pete said before about acknowledging that everybody has a different food systems to tackle here. And I found it very inspiring hearing that the distance we have is equal, more or less. So the next country, they're actually doing pretty okay in producing food for their own people, but they're looking into making their exports much more sustainable. We will go to Vietnam now, where Professor Dao Te An, Deputy Director General of the Vietnam Academy of Agriculture Sciences, will talk to us about their food system.
In reality, we still have some problem of malnutrition for the people living in a remote area, or the problem of obesity in the city increasing, and also problem of degradation of environment due to the agricultural intensification with the high use of chemical product. and also the problem of connection with the market. We focus on the consumption and supplying of the nutrition security and food security. Also, we have to attack both the problem in the consumption sector and also in the production sector, not only one. So for the production sector, we focus on the agroecology transition and working with farmers to reduce chemical use in order to reduce the environmental pollution, improve the food safety, and also reducing the negative impact on the environment. The Vietnam is one of agricultural exportation country. That means we supply the food not only for Vietnamese people but also for the world. So go ahead in the food system transformation. Vietnam want to ensure with the international community that we push the sustainability of food system. That means we continue to supply the safe food, good quality food and agricultural product, not only for Vietnamese population and also for international community, contributing in the world food security. And secondly, we will commit to develop a green and low carbon agricultural system in order to respond to the commitment of the COP26. For food system transformation locally, locally we can have some example of mountainous area. So we see that for the last 10 years, some areas farmer focusing too much on the product for commercialization. So some problem of malnutrition still happen. So now we work with local farmer to try to diversify the local production system in order to guarantee the local food system, food supply, in order to ensure the local nutrition and food securities. So we call this approach of nutrition sensitive agriculture. Support farmer on the agroecology transition. For example, using the agroforestry approach with the multi-stage of cultivation in the sloping land in order to reduce the negative impact on the soil erosion. This is the work of different stakeholders, not only farmer or not only business or not only Ministry of Agriculture. We need a coordination with the multi-stakeholder participation and across ministry.
So those were two examples, but as we heard, 100 countries made commitment to pathways. And what does a commitment anyway mean? They are being held accountable since they have to report in every year on how it's going with reaching these objectives they set out to. And every second year, they will be a part of the United Nations Food Systems Summit reporting framework. So we will be watching. Good. It was good to know in the beginning where you all were from. We saw a lot of governmental people, some from the private industry, some academia, some NGOs. It's also a lot of different nationalities here from all around the world. But the one thing we all have in common are that we are consumers. We buy food and we consume food. And we will now have a closer look at that and how the consumers influence the market decisions. We will board our virtual plane again, and this time we'll take a trip to Tanzania. We have Anna with us. She will be transmitting live, and Anna will take us to a tea factory. We have a video shooting from a market, and she'll be talking also to another organization, an organic organization out there. But before we go to Anna, I think we have a Slido job again for you, because we would like to know what you would like to know. So I'll give you a minute to look at the questions and please vote on what you would like Anna to ask out there in Tanzania, in Dar es Salaam.
Hello there, my name is Anna Portness, as I was introduced there, and I'm here at Kazi Yetu Tea Factory in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, with Modesta, who is a product manager, who will be going to take us through of what they're doing here. Hey, Modesta, tell us what you do here at Kazi Yetu product and
Can somebody read
the
Anna?
whole production.
Hi,
Okay.
I'm Modesta, in charge of production here at Kazi Yetu. So Kazi Yetu as
So
a
I think
company was incorporated
Tanzania is
in
already
2018,
happening.
and it's time to increase the local
It's to
value
prove it's
addition,
live, just in case you
processing,
wondered,
flavoring,
is it
and
really?
packaging of
And I can
products.
also see here that our algorithm is playing a game with
Final
us, because
products
at the
that
top we
can
have
be competitive.
So, can you hear me?
an accumulation of the other ones. So let's do the map quickly. 50, 65, 35, moving around, it'll still be 35. Anyway, it is still the first question. How can we get nutritious and sustainable food not just to a niche of relatively wealthy people, but to a wider segment of the population? As I told you in the beginning, 1 out of 4 do not have access to nutritious and safe food on this planet. So that is the question we'll put forward to Anna. Good. And while we try to get through and we get the thumbs up, so let's go to Tanzania. Dar es Salaam.
Hi everyone, again my name is Anna Portness. I'm here at Kazi Yetu Tea Factory in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, with Modesta, who is going to explain to us what they do here and the whole production. We're going to see it. Hi Modesta, tell us, what do you do here?
Hey, I'm Modesta, in charge of production here at Kazi Yetu. So Kazi Yetu as a company was incorporated in 2018, and we strive to increase the local value addition for goods and products produced here through processing, flavoring, and packaging. We also tend to support everyone we're working with. Tanzania Tea Collection, which is the first brand for Kazi Yetu, it entails the blending and packaging of tea. So we source all our raw materials, which is tea, herbs, and various spices from smallholder farmers from all parts of Tanzania and the Zanzibar Islands. We buy products from our farmers at a premium price, and we actually encourage them to do some little bit of value addition at the farm level. The products from the farmers are brought here at the factory, and here at the factory we do sorting, blending, and packaging ready to go to the market. There's nowhere at any point in our production process where we put any additives. And as you can see, the whole of the process here is handled 90% by women. And we have chosen to use that focus because if you look at the tea value chain in Tanzania, the whole of the tea value chain is dominated by male, and women are generally limited to the lower levels of production, mainly in plucking and drying in the farm areas. So we are really trying to minimize the gap by encouraging more women to participate in the upper levels of the tea production value chain.
Thank you very much for this. And I'm sure people who are watching us right now want to know the whole production. How do you do it? Can you take us through?
When we receive materials from our farmers from all over the country, they come here in a dried state, and here at the factory we do sorting, which is the first step to remove any unwanted materials. And after sorting, we do blending, which is we mix the tea together with herbs and spices, again from various smallholder farmers. We know our units of measure. So after blending, we pack them into pyramid tea bags and pack them into the final product, which is ready to go into the market.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. Now, I've seen you have a lot of women who are working here. Can I ask these ladies a few questions? Unajisikiaje kufanya kazi hapa na Kazi Yetu?
Najisikia vizuri.
Unajivunia nini kama mwanamke?
Najivunia kufanya kazi katika kampuni yetu ya wanawake. Nimefaidika na mambo mengi sana kupitia Kazi Yetu.
Kama yapi?
Nasomesha mwanangu, nasaidia wazazi wangu, nalipa kodi na mambo mengi mengi. Yes.
Okay. Na unataka kuambia nini? Kwa nini watu watumie hii chai ambayo mnaitengeneza?
Kwanza kabisa, chai ni kiburudisho na chai yetu haina kemikali aina yoyote. Tunatumia vitu asilia.
Okay, so what they're saying is they're very proud working with Kazi Yetu, and they're advising that people should use this tea because it's healthy and it's organic. Yeah, so now we're going to see the final product after they have do the sorting and
she's drinking tea now. Oh. So while we try to get the sound back.
Well.
Oh.
Can you hear me?
Now we hear you.
About this final product, why should people buy this?
So this is our final product, as you can see, that is ready to go to the market. I can say that here at Kazi Yetu, we are really passionate about our product, and we have invested so much into making this product look like this. We have invested resources in terms of time, money, and effort so that when we send this product to the market, it can really be competitive, both in the local market and in the export market.
Thank you very much, Modesta. But we're very lucky now we have one of the farmers who are doing organic farming, Mr. Eliza, who is going to tell us why he's doing that and why is organic farming very important. Unaweza kutuambia kwa nini unafikiri kilimo hiki ni muhimu na kwa nini unakifanya na watu wanatakiwa kifanye?
Kilimo hiki ni muhimu kwa sababu kinajenga afya za binadamu, kwa sababu hawatumii chemicals zozote. Kwa hiyo ni muhimu kwa watu wote kutumia kilimo hiki ambacho ni kilimo hai, organic product. Ni nzuri sana. Kwa hiyo tunaweza kuwapatia hata Kazi Yetu, wanaweza kusupply kwa watu wengine ili watu waongezeke zaidi ambao wanaweza kutumia organic product.
Okay. Elijah is saying that this organic farming is very important because he is also advising people on doing organic farming because it's healthy, they don't use any chemical or anything else. So thank you very much. And we just talked about one product, but we also have a person from I Am Organic, Mr. Andrew, who
Yeah. Until they come back, I guess there's some thoughts to be put behind the tea we all drink in the morning, and especially if it expired yesterday, it's still good enough to drink, yeah? There's been a lot of love from a farmer going into it and all these ladies sorting it and packing it and all their pride. So Anna, shall we try again? I think it's out of battery, that microphone, no? Is that the problem? Yeah, we don't hear you, Anna. Maybe we put on the movie now, because Anna did have an opportunity to visit an early morning market. Now, I think it was working. Try again, Anna.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, let's go to the market and then we'll come back. So I'm here at Magomeni Market, one of the busiest and biggest market here in Dar es Salaam, and I'll be talking to some of the traders about their products, where do they get them, and why did they decide to do here. So, and I'm here with my friend. Hi.
Hi.
Mambo.
Poa.
Unaitwa nani?
Musa.
Okay, Musa, unafanya biashara gani na mzigo wako unachukua wapi?
Mimi nafanya biashara ya dagaa. Nauza dagaa uchimba, dagaa kamba, nauza dagaa nyama, nauza na dagaa wa Mwanza. Hao dagaa Mwanza wanapokea Mwanza kwenyewe. Kwa jumla wanachukulia Mwanza wanakuja Ilala. Ila mimi kwa sababu nimefanya biashara mdogo, sasa hivi nachukulia Ilala kwa bei ya jumla.
Okay, so what he's saying is he's dealing with a seafood. He's selling daga. This is what we call it in Tanzania, seafood. And he is taking his seafood from Mwanza. But since he is a small business person, he is taking, for now, he's taking them in Ilala, which is one of the markets here in Dar es Salaam. Na kwa nini uliamua kufanya hii biashara ya dagaa?
Hii biashara ya dagaa nilifanya kutaka kujikwamua kimaisha. Nipendelea kufanya biashara ya dagaa, lakini sio kwa biashara ambayo mimi nimeanza. Nimelisi biashara ya dagaa kutoka kwa mzee wangu. Mzee wangu alikuwa anauza biashara hii siku nyingi sana. Kwa hiyo na mimi wakati huo mimi nasoma. Kwa hiyo na mimi nilipomaliza darasa la 7, elimu yangu sio kubwa, darasa la 7, nilipomaliza darasa la 7, mzee akaniletea ulisi biashara ya dagaa. Kwa hiyo nikaanza kufanya biashara ya dagaa.
Amazing. So he said that he is doing this business because his dad or his father was doing this business, and since he didn't go to school, when he finished standard 7, he decided to involve himself with this business. So that's why he's doing this business right now. Okay, so now, thank you very much. Asante sana.
Asante sana.
Okay, so now after talking to him, we're going to talk to another trader who is here at Magomeni Market and see what they're selling. Habari yako mama?
Salama.
Za kazi?
Salama za kwa.
Unaitwa nani na unajihusisha na biashara gani?
Mimi naitwa Jamila Mustafa, najihusisha na biashara ya mboga mboga na mboga za majani, nyanya, vitunguu, karoti na hoho.
Okay, so she's saying she is selling tomatoes, carrots and other vegetables here at Magomeni. Kwa nini uliamua kufanya hii biashara?
Niliamua kufanya hii biashara kwa sababu niliona ni muhimu katika maisha ya mwanadamu.
And what he's saying is because a lot of people are in need of these ingredients, so that's why she decided to involve herself in this business. Na tofauti na nyanya na karoti na hoho pamoja na mboga mboga, mna biashara nyingine unafanya? Na unafanya na nani?
Mimi nafanya niko peke yangu.
Okay, so this is the only business that she's doing, and she is doing it all by herself. That is what she's saying. Asante.
Asante.
So, done with her, we're going to another person who is selling, let's see. So, okay, someone who's selling fruit here. Habari, safi. Okay. Habari ya kazi jamani. Wazima, habari zenu? Mambo. Habari.
Kama vipi?
Safi za kazi.
Salama za kutwa.
Unaitwa nani na unafanya biashara gani hapa?
Naitwa Msawira Ali Maratu, biashara yangu ndio hii ya matunda hii.
Okay, matunda yako unayachukua wapi na kwa nini uliamua kufanya biashara ya matunda?
Masoko mbalimbali. Kuna masoko ya jumla, kuna Buguruni, kuna Ilala, kuna Temeke. Nimeamua kufanya biashara hii sababu ndio sehemu ya maisha yangu.
Okay, so he is selling fruits. He's actually selling mangoes, bananas, passions, all different of fruits, and he is taking his product from different markets here in Dar es Salaam. Okay, unaonaje future, yani unaonaje kuelekea huko tunakoelekea, biashara yako unaifanya unaizungumziaje au unaionaje?
Biashara yangu inategemea na ina wakati. Kuna wakati inakuwa nzuri, wakati inakuwa mbaya. Na anapoelekea kama itakuwa nzuri nibadilishe biashara tofauti na hii.
Okay, so he's saying that the future of his business depends on how the customer will respond. But he says that if the business happened to change and he found something else which brings more money, he might change and do something else. Okay, so after looking at at the market, now we're back here with someone from Organic, and there's a question here for you. Okay. How can we get nutritious and sustainable food, not just to a niche of relative wealth people, but to a wider segment of the population?
Okay, great. We can make these products available to the general public first by growing awareness, providing information about the benefits of these products to the general public in the regular market so they understand the benefits. But second is the government support to come up with the good policies to support the farmers produce more of organic produce and healthy foods.
Okay.
Yes.
So can you show us or explain to us your products?
Some of our products are here. This is coffee beans, the organic coffee beans, medium roasters from the smallholder farmers. This is being prepared by the smallholder farmers. We only package it. And also we have this sunflower oil, the cold-pressed sunflower oil from the organic farmers, also in southern Tanzania. We also have sesame oil from the same place. We have moringa oil for skin and hair. It's also organic. And also coconut oil from the same farmers. We have cashew nuts there. They are all from prepared by the smallholder farmers. We only package them and get them to the market. Yes.
Okay. One last question. Being that the person that you're working with, you are producing organic products, what would you say is the biggest challenge here in Tanzania when it comes to organic farming?
The challenge is there is a shortage in supply of the organic produce to the general public, and also awareness. There is still a problem with the information. People are not informed about the organic produce, the benefits of organic produce to their health, to the environment, and how they can benefit or they can get income from the organic produce.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Andrew.
Thank you so much.
Okay, back to you.
Thank you so much, Anna, and for standing through some tech issues. But we were for a moment all in Dar es Salaam in Tanzania, and now we're back in Geneva, where the snow will come in a few hours, I guess. Thank you, Anna, and everybody.
Cannot work in film. It's stressful.
You sent it back up.
Right. So, yeah, we're back here, and we saw a bit of what was happening out there in the market and how the traders say, well, we follow what the consumers tell us to do, and we grasp that opportunity that we see that's within business. So again, on the powers of the consumer. Pete told us that there were 4 levers here. He talked about the governance around it, the economy and finance, and indeed the individual actions, and finally science and technology. It's now my pleasure to bid up here Diane and Pete. We are ready for a panel to get more insight, and it will be a hybrid panel. I have personally not done this before, so let's see how it goes. Please have a seat there, number 2 and 3. Good. And both for the audience who are joining us virtually and for you here in the room, there will be an opportunity to interact with some questions. So if you go back to Slido, and as you get inspired and go along, you can type in your questions here. And I believe you can also vote for each other's questions where you say, yeah, I'd like to know that too. And at the end, we'll have time for some questions. Good. So do we have our virtual panelists with us now? Yeah, I'm seeing a nod. So then I would like to welcome first Ismaeen Eloufi, Chief Scientist of the FAO, and she's joining us today from Dubai. Welcome to you, Ismaeen. We have also Jessica Fanso. She's the Director and Professor of Global Food and Agriculture Policy and Ethics at the Hopkins University. And Jessica is joining us from New York today. Live, in person, with legs, we have here first Diane Holsdorf, the Executive Vice President at World Business Council on Sustainable Development here in Geneva. And we welcome back Pete Messerly, as you know, the Director of the Wyss Academy here in Bern. Good. I would like each one of our panelists first to introduce yourselves and introduce your organization and what is your work around us working towards this more sustainable food, or these sustainable food systems. I got corrected there. There are many food systems, as many as there are countries. And then I have a little bit of a personal question, because we signed up for these SDGs 7 years ago, and I would like to know what has changed on your plate, on your food plate, comparing today with 7 years ago. So why don't we start here with Ismaeen? Are you with us?
Yes, I'm here, Christina. Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear and see you. Now we see you. So tell us about what is happening at the FAO, but maybe start with, how does your plate look today?
So my plate today, as many days, was a Moroccan dish for lunch. So I'm gonna try it with the latest things that I had, that had beef in it and had vegetables, a lot of vegetables. And in the morning, I had an Arabic bread with a lot of lentils and chickpeas and a bit of cheese and olive oil and tomato and cucumber. It's an Arabic really breakfast. So my plate is quite diverse in general. So, you know, by the end, you eat what you are used to eat. So it's our upbringing. It's extremely important in us deciding what to eat or what not to eat. And I think as a Moroccan, I grew up really eating a lot the Moroccan diet. And the Moroccan diet is very heavy on vegetables and fruit in general. And normally we have really, in the old days, we used to all eat from the same plate. And when I grew up, that's how it was in my childhood. And whereby we start with vegetables and then the meat, it's a small piece that by the end we divide between each other. So the father would normally divide it. So I came from a house where bread is very important, of course, but vegetables is the most important. And meat is a small piece. And I think as I grow up, I continued with that. And I added more, I would say, fruits to my diet, but also I added lots of fibers and I added lots of fermented things. So in general, fermented stuff, be it from dairy or other products.
Yeah,
so that's what my plates look like.
Great.
Christina.
Thank you for sharing that. And maybe you can tell us a little bit about what are you guys doing at the FAO in terms of supporting the transformation towards a sustainable food system.
So at FAO, I think it's one of the leading organizations that started talking about transforming food system a few years ago. And the UN Food Systems Summit was a great opportunity for us really to showcase what do we mean by that. And as a matter of fact, the strategic framework of FAO, it's really based on a transformation of the food system. And it was developed in 2020. We finalized it in early 2021, and it was going through the governing bodies, I would say, from December 2020 to June 21 to be finalized. So the latest version we had was in late 2020. And there what we are saying is that our strategic framework, it's really centered on leaving no one behind. So this was like the heart of it. And we chose 3 SDGs that we are focusing on. And that's SDG 2, zero hunger, SDG 1, no poverty, and SDG 10, which is reducing inequalities. And what we are saying is that we want to transform our agri-food system to make it more efficient, to make it more inclusive, to make it more resilient and more sustainable. And to do so, we are focusing on 4 betters. So we are pushing for a better production, better nutrition, a better environment, and by the end, all of this hopefully will give us a better life, leaving no one behind. So the leaving no one behind, I think it's very important. The 3 SDGs, the transformation toward efficiency, inclusivity, resilience, and sustainable. And I do really, it's one of the reasons why I joined the organization. I find the strategy amazing, and I was part of it. I came at the end of it myself in the last few months. But really, it talks to me because it is about time to say that agriculture and agri-food system, we have to think at the system level, and we have to transform it to serve us better as human and to serve better the planet out of which we live, all of us.
Thank you so much, Ismail, for this introduction. We're going to dive a little bit further into what you're doing and what is actually coming out of this in a minute. But before we do that, let's hear it from Jessica in New York. Hello, Jessica.
Hi, everybody. It's nice to be here.
So please share with us what you are doing at the Johns Hopkins University, and also, has your plate changed since 2015?
Okay, great. So the Johns Hopkins Global Food Policy and Ethics Program, we really focus on 3 areas of mainly research, but also research that informs policy. The first area is around improving food systems decision-making. Policymakers are often in the dark on how their food systems are performing, potential near and long-term risks, and where to intervene. So we've developed a couple of projects where we are trying to improve data decision-making. We have something called the Food Systems Dashboard that brings together a lot of indicators and presents how food systems are performing. And we also have the Food Systems Countdown Initiative, which is selecting some of the highest quality indicators to track across the next decade to 2030, the SDG end line. And that work is in collaboration with Isfahan, is involved in both projects with FAO, as well as the Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition and many other partners and collaborators coming together on those projects. The other 2 areas that we work on is understanding how foodscapes influence diets. Now, I was part of the Eat Lancet Commission, and that was a very global study trying to understand how food systems and diets are impacting human and planetary health. But what does it mean at the local level? What does it mean in the Mekong River area? What does it mean for pastoralists living in northern Kenya? So a lot of the work that we're doing now is more field work to try to understand the influence of place on sustainable diets and meeting citizens where they live and trying to understand more deeply how difficult it is to achieve both healthy and sustainable diets for people. And then the last, and this is funded by Swiss Development Corporation, is looking at rights issues across food systems. So how do we ensure that rights holders are being a part of the conversation when we talk about food systems transformation and policy change? So that's just some of the work that we're doing at Hopkins as researchers and as an academic organization. My plate has largely moved more towards being a pescatarian, but within that, I would say even mainly bivalves. I'm a huge fan of clams and oysters, so we eat quite low on the seafood chain. For pescatarians, don't eat a lot of big fish. You know, sushi is a treat when it does happen. I also, we're a household of pretty much zero waste. And I would say as I get older, since I've turned 50, I'm just trying to consume a lot less food because I just don't need a lot of food to survive. But I would say just one last thing on top of it. I think we have to think about just consumption overall. It's not just food. You know, there's a benefit to living in big cities, living in small spaces, not having a car, flying less. You know, I think for some populations, there needs to be bigger shifts in lifestyle changes because, take the United States, per capita, we're huge greenhouse gas emitters. So it's not only the kinds of foods that we choose and the kind of diets we consume, but it's lifestyle and becoming less consumers overall of all material goods. We have to move in that direction. As Peter said, we have to change many systems if we really want to see transformations across equity and climate change. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much to you, Jessica. And on the point of consumption overall, I've also been told that consumers do not appreciate being called consumers anymore because it has a negative tonality. Nobody wants to consume. So hereinafter, we refer to them as citizens. And I think it's an interesting move that we see here. Good. Diane? Again, welcome. I think you only had to jump a few streets over, I guess, to come and join us. But we would really like to hear what is happening inside this very secret World Business Council on Sustainability Development, and we would also like to hear what's changed on your plate the last years.
I have never heard the World Business Council for Sustainable Development referred to as a secret, so I'll take that back and we'll have to work on that. We're really proud as an organization to be based here in Geneva, as I am as well, and as the Executive Vice President, it's an organization that brings together more than 200 of the global leading businesses who are embedding sustainability into not just their strategies, but actually their plans and their operations and their value chains. And that's the work that we do collectively, because we recognize that every business needs to be prepared to take action, not just prevent risk, but to take action in the face of climate change, the rapid loss of nature, and the incredible rise in inequality. And the other thing that's driving this, of course, is that capital markets and investors and shareholders are increasingly assessing both financial and non-financial performance measures for companies, and that includes all of these types of environmental, social, and governance measures that we've been talking about here. And at the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, we take those collective actions together with our members and many partners, including some of those here on the panel and others who we've been in contact with here today at this event, who are driving these transformations through the big economic sectors that they represent, including, and in particular, the food and agricultural sector. Many of our members are within the value system, the value chains of the food and agricultural system, and we're doing quite a lot of work around ensuring that the food system is net zero, nature positive, and equitable, and can provide sufficient nutrition for all. That is a large challenge because, as Pete said, of course, food systems vary tremendously, and there's both cultural norms that drive both production and diets, as well as real practical geographic temperate limitations or benefits that are shifting rapidly in many of these countries. So these farmers are having to respond quite quickly, and that's often affecting food prices, food availability, and accessibility on a global scale. And then when we throw in some of these rapid transforming moments such as COVID, or currently the crisis of the war in the Ukraine, we see these value chains and supply chains really impacted. And that is much of why we are coming together as business leaders to assess what are the immediate actions that need to be taken, particularly in the case currently that we can avoid a tremendous food crisis as a result of the war in Ukraine. So that's a little bit about the work we do. We'll dive into more specifics as we get into it. My plate is almost entirely vegetables, legumes, and grains. Although, living here in Geneva, gotta love the local sustainable dairy products. Yes, cheese, yogurts, amazing, delicious dairy yumminess. So that's absolutely part of the plate as well.
Well, it sounds like a very well thought through plate. And how did it look 7 years ago, if I may ask, Diane?
Yeah, 7 years ago, I ate more meats, more fish. And it's really through my own personal health transition. Jess, you said it as well, we don't need to eat quite as much. So part of the scaling back was looking at sustainability, was looking at health, was looking at local and seasonal access, and trying to change and make decisions based on that. Because although we may not want to refer to ourselves as consumers, each of us do make choices on what we choose to eat and what we choose to serve and prepare for those that we love. And so it's being more informed and more deliberate about those choices that have really created a lot of my own personal shifts. But, you know, I've got a child who's vegan, and, well, two. So there's a lot of different shifts going on in the market that we're trying to pay attention to as well and understand what are those actual implications for both health as well as all the way back to farm.
Yeah, because as we heard before also, no system works alone. So
yeah, absolutely.
We need to understand. Thank you, Diane. And Pete, we didn't have a chance to ask you questions before, but now we would like to hear more about your work and also about your plate.
Thanks a lot. Well, I think for the Wyss Academy for Nature, it has a lot to do with what I was presenting. I think, you know, the last years, 10 years, I was at the University in Sustainability Science, and then embraced this mandate of the UN Secretary General for this Global Sustainable Development Report. And, you know, in 2019, I sometimes realized we know so much, and you know, even many decision makers probably imagine the big crisis much better than the changing of systems. So this gap which we have in our heads, but also as a society, between knowing and doing things is just growing. And that really had some serious questions for me, for science, you know. We are describing the planet, how it's going the wrong way, but are we really contributing to solutions? And then the second thing is, you know, we cannot work together. We're still working in silos. Here is science, there is policy, here is the business sector, and I don't see a collective work on solutions. So that was a little bit the background where we approached also a philanthropic donor who, his name is in the brand. And I think it's really the money, not the money itself, it's also that we can do things in a different way. We don't have to report in peer-reviewed publication, but at the same time, we don't have to be accountable of the taxpayers' money before we even start. So we can experiment, we can try things out, and we have a right to fail. And I think that's what needed. With this type of complexity, we have to try things out and have to have a right to fail. So that's what we do. We try to actually find those virtuous cycles between human well-being and protecting nature. And it's a big bet, I'm aware, and it's ambitious, but we're doing that in 4 regions of the world and try to offer a platform for experimentation with different stakeholders. So we're at the very beginning. And yeah?
Yeah, so Peter, with this, I feel the courage coming through a lot, and your call for courage. So I'm really curious to know what you are eating to expel that courage.
You know, this, I think we call this cognitive dissonance. I'm also having that between knowing and doing, and the same is my plate of food, which of course was a normal Swiss average plate. But I must say it changed a lot in the last years. And, you know, looking at scientifically on myself as an example, it was interesting. And I think others in my age are in the same situation, having kids. You know, out of 3, we have 1 vegan, 1 vegetarian. And what's happening then, you know, it's you're kind of leaving out food, but I would say there is a tipping point where you realize you can just not only leave the food, the meat to the side, you have to buy a new recipe book and you start cooking differently, and things change. And ultimately what is interesting is, you know, sustainability is not just, oh, you know, I have to spare the meat. It's a different story. It's I live better, I have another value, and it's a better life. And I think we can learn from that. You know, when we have stories about leading a better life, that's something which is contagious. It's not about sparing or paying for things. And for me then, you know, we are now at the proof of concept because they all moved out. So, and actually it's interesting.
Is this
we're not going back because your preferences has changed. So I'm optimistic that things can change, but you need pressure, you need good ideas and good stories and empathy, and it's not the intellectuality alone, I would say.
Great. So thank you all for being so honest. And I think it's very inspiring to hear that if anybody, these 4 panelists, they have the knowledge about what they should put on their plate, and yet they do make their choices on what can they give up and what should they sacrifice for the family piece at the table and whatever, and still have some pleasures that is not 100% conform. And that's where I think many people go wrong. They say, no, it's too complicated, I'm not going to go there, I cannot do all this. But choose your battles with care and try, experiment. Yes. Did you want to add something?
Christina, just reflecting what we heard, in my view, I think in many ways, and maybe I can talk about certain communities, at an individual level, we find ourselves, our diet improve, particularly with Asian health, as many of the colleagues said. But at the community level, it's the other way around. So if I think about it myself and I take the analogy, for me as a person, yes, I could see that my diet have changed in the right direction. And many of it's due to the awareness, but also the health. But then when I look at the communities in Morocco, if I compare how the people were when I was born, I also turned 50, like Jess. So it's 50 years, I see that at the community level, the way we are eating, it's much better 50 years ago. So I don't know if you see the dichotomy. The dichotomy as person, it might have improved because of our age, but really at the population level, at the community level, it's not the case. Because a kid today, what they're eating at 7, for example, their diet was much better 50 years ago than now. So if you understand what I'm aiming to, in many ways, the simplicity 50 years ago was much better. There was much less waste and loss in general, particularly loss. There was much more sharing, less storage in terms of you eat fresh, everything is fresh, everything is seasonal, and so on and so forth. So it's at the community level, the globalization did not have the awareness and the age. It's one of the only things that makes you really change your diet. But in terms of having accessibility to food, to let's say carrots all years or oranges all years or whatever, all years, that didn't help us at all. No. It's mixed up a lot, many families in terms of diet and food.
Thank you, Ismail. Let's talk a little bit more about what needs to change. And also, as we've heard several times, it's systemic. It's not isolated one thing over the other. I mean, if we say, okay, let's all eat apples, the European apple today only has 5% of the nutrients it had 30 years ago. So that doesn't work either, does it? But let's start with one of these different levers, and we'll get to the others as we talk about building this food system. Because let's start with who we all are, citizens. This time, yeah. Pete, what is it that we need to change, each one of us? The 8 billion people on the earth. I know you're going to tell me, Christina, it's different. But try and help us here. What habits? What do we need to do different?
Well, I think we have to be careful of just delegating everything to the citizen or to the what did you call it? Not the consumer, the citizens. The consumers. The not consumer. It's also part of the very liberal world that you say, we don't need to touch that. That's a consumer choice. It's none of our business. That's too cheap. It's delegating the responsibility to a level. So I would say it needs the interplay between, of course, the regulatory part. What is a safe food policy? Who has access at what price to what type of food? These are regulatory questions which cannot be only delegated to basically your cash receipt that you get when at the checkout. So that's one thing. The other thing, I think, technology and science has a role to play. I'm also chairing the Global Land Program. They have now developed, a tracing system where you basically trace back the soya to the very municipality in Brazil, and you can basically see where did the forest light up in the last couple of years and by whose money was behind it. So where we are involved in those changes and to translate that into consumer choices through new technologies or even connecting consumers and producers across long distances, these are all elements that need to fit in. So, of course.
Good. I got it.
And let's try. Let's innovate. I think we need just to move and experiment.
Let's move it. Let's give the consumers a break. Let's go to the policymakers. Let's indeed do that. Jessica, you're studying these policies. Why don't you just encourage Ismahan and the people at the FAO and everybody else to make the policies that can get our food system back on track? We're not just talking net zero because we've gone too far. We need net positive here. So, Jessica, what's happening? Policies. Can we make policies?
FAO doesn't really make policies. They advise governments on how to better formulate their policies and give them guidance and tools. And maybe I'll let Ismahan talk about FAO's role in doing that in advising states. But I think there is a movement now following the UN Food Systems Summit towards food systems transformation pathways for countries. But I think when we look at the agriculture sector or we look at ministries of health, some of the traditional policies are quite entrenched politically. You think about agriculture subsidy policies or you think about trade policies. And we've done a lot of work in providing guidance and evidence on what it would take to reorient agriculture subsidy policies, what it would take to invest in smallholders to diversify, what it would take to ensure that citizens have economic, physical, and social access to healthy diets. And there's a lot of really good case studies across the world where countries have tried to reorient their subsidy policies or incentivize retailers to change the choice architecture of what's sold, or to create a labeling program, or Diane can talk about industry doing a lot of reformulation to try to drive down the unhealthy ingredients in their products. So there's a lot of efforts across different pockets of the world, but a lot of that just needs now to be scaled up. And that's where the rubber really meets the road. It's the scaling of these different pilot policies that have been done and exemplars around the world. So to me, we have a lot of evidence of how to change policy. I think we really get stuck, though, with some of the political economy issues, particularly if we look at the United States. We're incredibly fractured when we talk about food systems and policy change. So it's really, to me, an enabling environment issue for many countries to be able to scale up.
So just to sum that up, what you're saying is that we have some great policies in place, some places where it's working. We need to roll them out. We need to scale them up. There are solutions. I'd like to hear more about that later. But before that, the other thing Pete says was science and technology. Now, I hear kind of the same when I talk to different companies and academia saying, we have the science and technology needed for a sustainable food system. We just need to roll it out. What's your opinion about that, Diane? Do we have what it takes? And why are your 200 food companies not moving faster in rolling that out? Sorry for being a little bit, but if we have it, do we have it?
I don't think we have globally aligned science on healthy diets yet, actually. Clearly we do on the environment and on the planetary boundaries. We've got work developing on what are the implications for nature and nature loss through agricultural systems, with the references to the Amazon that were made, and these big ecosystems that are severely challenged. There's more work to be done on some of the traceability and visibility in these spaces, but on the health implications of diet, it is truly still needing to be localized, made more consistent, and rolled up into policy that is coherent across the health, economic, environment, and agriculture ministries that each have a piece of that. The role of business, though, is really, really important, because portfolio renovation, reformulation, removal of things that are recognized to be not healthy, accelerating healthier portfolio products, those all need to happen. They are very much underway by the global leading businesses, but there's so much more work to be done. And as you start to roll into more regional and national and even local food producers, there's not always the same level of technology available, or even sometimes knowledge available, or recognition of demand in the market for why some of these changes need to be made to remove the unhealthy oils, remove the unhealthy fats, reduce sugar and salt. Those are just basic blocking and tackling aspects that many of the big companies have really been driving towards the majority of their portfolio, but more needs to happen at multiple levels. Where we're seeing from the big companies, the biggest growth areas, however, are in some of these newer areas. It's in the alternative protein space. It's in the vegetarian offering space. And there's a lot of excitement, a lot of competition, and a lot of upstart challenge to inherent market leaders that is going to be very much shifting space at shelf, regardless of what that shelf space looks like, be it a corner market or a large retailer. So these changes are coming from some from regulatory pressure, increasingly from voluntary and regulatory changes to reformulation and product choices, but also from competition and demand that's going to create some really interesting opportunity spaces.
That's great. When profit and purpose comes together, then that's when the magic happens, isn't it? If we were to imagine then that these technologies were there, the new technologies, how do you think the consumers will react? We talk about cultured meat, we talk about other things. What is your own hypothesis there?
You know, I think globally we're seeing a real fracture in consumer acceptance of science. And it varies by market, it varies by education, it varies by a lot of different factors. I think that there's, you know, food choices we already spoke about are inherently personal. What we choose to put in our body is super personal. And making that seem like a scientifically adjusted food, that's scary for a lot of people. You know, not very many people have experience on what it means to have lab-produced benefit. So I think we need to be concerned about perception, aware of the challenge of understanding, and be very thoughtful about how these opportunities that can be, frankly, quite transformational for both sustainability and health are portrayed to consumers, citizens, when we're offering these choices. Where we see the greatest pickup tend to start is when it comes through food service, when it shows up in restaurants, when it becomes trendy, it tends to be more acceptable. But that then slows scale because there's a perception of cost that is often associated with that. And we've got to break that down also. So I don't think there's a very easy solution. I think it's highly cultural. And I think we need to be cautious of the the concern, the very personal concern and the educational awareness around what it really means to produce some of these opportunities spaces.
Okay, so patience, education, and much more is needed there. Good. Ismael, I would like to put together something we heard from Pete and we heard from Jessica around the policies, and that we have examples of policies that are working, and Peter's also saying, yeah, we're working very in silos. And what can we do on an international level to exchange more of this knowledge and maybe even put additional policies behind it? And are we doing something at the moment? Can you enlighten us there?
Absolutely. I mean, I agree with Jess. There is a lot of know-how, and there is a lot know-how on all sides, on science and innovation, but also on the policy side, or what could work. The issue, I think, is that most policies are national, whereas the impact is international. So the global market is a global market, whereas we are always looking at the lenses at the national level. And of course, countries have the sovereignty right to take their own decision and make their own public policy. But the reality of things, FAO, as Jess said, could only influence. So one of our main role as an organization, it's really to provide policy support and policy advice, as well as knowledge, provide knowledge, access to knowledge, capacity building, and tech assistance to the countries. By the end, really, the game, it's not in our hands. So what we are providing, it's standards, it's information, it's success stories. But what happens globally, I think the issue we have, there is a huge component on affordability. So the components of affordability touch up on scalability of science and technology that could help us on all fronts, on the sustainability front, on the nutrition front, as well as both sustainable and nutrition and many other fronts. The problem is that most of the technology is unaffordable for most of the small-scale farmers or producers in the least income countries. The other component, it's also that we are trying to use simplistic way of solving an issue. So the issue, it's very complex. And finally, we are talking at the system level. So we were always very much talking at the production level, then we moved to the value chain, and which is still within the agriculture sector at large, including fisheries and aquaculture. But now we talk at the food system level, whereby we are touching on energy, we are touching on health, we are touching on infrastructure. So this is finally we came to that level of complexity. So our solution has also to be complex. And that's really what we are trying to do to FAO. we are serving 194 countries, whereby their ecosystem, their political system, their cultural system, their relationship with the world is different, and we are trying to provide both technical assistance as well as policy advice, something that works better. And there, what I want to end up with my little intervention is that we tend to go with the trends. So the trends cannot work for everybody. So if we are talking about alternative plant-based proteins, it cannot work with everybody, because the example between India and the US shows you that India have maybe about 8 kilos of meat per year per person, and the US you are close to the 200. So when you are talking about reducing your meat or increasing your plant or finding solution, we have to keep in mind that the planet is diverse, the culture is diverse, and our solution has to be diverse. So I'm a little bit against making everything a trend, because as you said, as Keith said, I have also in my family, I have 2 kids, I have a vegan one. I see more youth that are attracted to veganism because of the publicity. They have no knowledge on nutrition. And many of them, they need certain nutrients and they will lack it when they choose certain things at certain age. So we need really to be a little bit more in depth. Instead of making publicity on one thing, we need to really be recognizant that it's complex, it is connected to the health, it is connected to their physiological status, it is connected to their culture. So that's where, for me, the solution, be it on the consumption side or at the food system level, is to go back to biodiversity and go back to diversification more. So both that we need to produce much more things. It doesn't make sense that we are focusing right now, like if I talk only on the plant side, on 150 crops, whereas historically, our ancestors have been producing 30,000 different crops. So it doesn't make sense that we are using 150 after the 30,000 that we know, and out of the 400,000 that exist on the planet. But also that diversification has to go along the food system. The diversification has to come in the processing, in the fermentation, in the markets as well, in the way that we are connecting between us. So if I may, it's on the policy side and so on and so forth. So it's diversification, because diversification will allow you to get all the nutrients you need, like enzymes. It's not only proteins, it's not only calories, it's other micronutrients that we need to look at, not only iron and vitamin A and the ones that we have mentioned, but there are a number of amino acids, a number of enzymes that are very important. And now we came to know how important they are for most diseases, like cancer. But maybe just to come back on the diversification, it's the diversification at all levels, and it's a bit of leveling in terms of subsidies. I want to go back to the point on subsidies that Jess brought. I have once a farmer from Tunisia that told me it doesn't make sense that my production cost as a Tunisian farmer, it's higher than a Spanish or an Italian or a French. And he said, I produce it, maybe it's a better quality, but I can't sell it. Because the subsidies, again, in Europe are making it what it is. So subsidies, it's a tricky point that we need to address.
So in summary, the decomplexity and the need for diversity are two major things to overcome. I know the audience have been typing in some questions they would like to ask the panel. So let's have a look at those questions to see what opportunities we would like to take here. So there's a first question for Pete here, asking what is the role of individual choice over system change? For example, if the consumers make wiser dietary choices that reduce their carbon and environmental footprint and health. So the role here, and I think also in the light of knowing within the next 28 years, we're going to increase potentially our population with another 2 billion people with 25%, that will need more than 50% more because it's a more affluent population. Now, what can we do here on the individual choice level, Pete?
Well, I think it is one of the key questions. What will be the demand for food in quantity and quality? I think that is one of the game-changing questions to me. The other game-changing question is, of course, the value chain. Where I'm more confident is actually that the producers will produce safely and good and diverse and ideas. There I have a lot of confidence, but the other two are for me really huge variables and which will drive us to different scenarios. Now, about the food choice, I think, there I answered a little bit as a land system scientist. We are using half of the habitable land of Earth we are using for agriculture these days. About 1/3 is forests and then the rest. So this agricultural land, out of this we are using 2/3 for livestock and dairy. And with these 2/3 we're producing 20% of the 30% of the proteins and about 20% of the calories. So we're allocating the massive part of it to food and dairy. So not everybody has to turn vegan, but if even we have changed choices, you put up lamb, I would still put the beef, of course, in terms of quantity. If we just have a little bit of changing diets, that will free up so much space. That will free up space for carbon sequestration, for 30 by 30 biodiversity conservation, and so on. So there we really have a huge lever in our hands. So I would respond, yes, it is a key lever. It has to be a first priority, but let's not just leave it to anecdotal stories as we just provided from our plates. We have to look at it more systemically with its political dimension, the economic. Who are the power holders behind those decisions? We don't have the easy answer, but just to reinforce, yes, it is a game changer.
I just heard from the audience, somebody whispered subsidies, because we also see that there tends to go a lot of subsidies into this traditional farming and not so much into the future of farming. Any thoughts on that from the panel?
I'm happy to take that one as a starting point. There's a huge benefit to be gained if we are thoughtful in how agricultural subsidies are reapplied. It's not so much a removal, it's a reapplication. There's a lot of money in the global system that is being applied to what has been, frankly, proven over time to be an incredibly efficient, yet very limited agricultural global market. We've learned and seen now the implications of that, and need to make smart investments that go towards regenerative practices, diversification, smaller value and supply chains, shorter supply chains than perhaps what we've set the system up to deliver. And subsidies can play a very significant role in helping shepherd those changes without creating essentially an economic crash at a farmer level in any individual country.
Thank you, Diane. Another question here is, can we really rely on people making these wiser decisions? You talk about reduce the animal protein intake, buy local, what else we call for, less waste. But can we rely on that? Or do we actually need some taxes to come in here and some restrictions? The true cost of food, we don't even know what it is. Jessica, what do you think about that? Shouldn't we be paying $25 or Swiss francs, I think is 1-to-1, for a small steak? Because that's what it costs the society and the farmer and the planet and everything.
I think that depends on where you are. Animal source foods are very costly for certain parts of the world where they can't afford that, and they need those foods because they're nutrient dense. So I think it's not as simple. And when I think about that question, I do think that there needs to be a bit of hard and soft policies. Of course, we need to regulate industry when they are not behaving badly or behaving well and promoting public health and environmental stewardship. And there needs to be a taxing of certain unhealthy foods like soda, regulating through labels and warning, and that drives private sector often to try to reformulate those foods so they don't want those warning stickers on their products, so they will attempt to reformulate. But we also need more soft policies. We can't just assume that consumers are, put all the responsibility on citizens, people. We need to help them. We need front of the pack labels that are very clear and easy to understand. We need better choice architecture. We need nudges to allow for people to make easier choices about what's healthy and sustainable. So there's a lot of different ways that we can message, nudge, and provide information for consumers, in-store signage, where food is placed, what food is promoted, what's the price of those foods. So we need to help people along the way. And it's a mixture of not just, taxing is not going to solve everything. It's one policy. We need a whole range of policies across food environments, choice architecture.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to say there's another question. With so much to be done, where will investment have the biggest or the greatest impact?
And that question, Jessica, I would like to make a little game with all four of you here, building on that question.
Can I come on the subsidies? Can I come on the taxation, please? Because I think...
Just in a minute, Ismail, because I really like to give all four of you to answer this question. I'm now giving each one of you 1 billion Swiss francs. You have to spend it within the next 6 months to do what the person here asked to be done, make an investment that will give the greatest impact. I'll give you 3 seconds to think about where will you put the 1 billion Swiss francs to make the biggest impact on the food system within this next 6 months. You cannot invest them.
This is, I think, a really problematic question because it's this silver bullet approach that we need to move away from. There isn't going to be one solution that has the greatest
just choose
impact.
Just choose one.
But
Where
I
would you put
refuse
it?
to do it because I know that to stay below 1.5, we need to take multiplier actions across the food system. So to me, it's not a constructive, no offense to the person, I understand that wanting and need, but I just don't think, I think we need to move away from that idea that if I have $1 billion.
But it seems like it's overwhelming. There's so much to be done. It's so complex. We can't do it.
Christina, I think the question before, I'm going to give more time to my colleagues to think about it. But really, I think I want to continue on what Jess said about the labeling and helping the citizen. I think the public procurement is another area that could make a huge difference. Be it the public procurement at the country level, all across the world, that is very much right now skewed toward non-nutritious food, but also within WFP, for example, which is the biggest procurer of food in the world. And they are still going with staple crops and they are still going with less nutritious food. So I think there are a lot of entry points that could make a huge difference. The other component that I would add to what Jess did, and her list was really very strong, it's really responsibilizing the private sector. Right now, the private sector, they do a bit of ESG to have a better reputation, but there is way too much unhealthy food. And they have a power of making it to the most remote area. You go to any remote areas in any country, you still find private sector. So they have a power. They have a power of reaching the most remote area. Why don't they do it with nutrition in mind and with a circular economy, but also really a full life cycle approach when you think about the whole footprint of the crop? So on the private sector, I think it's a must that we act, and I'm glad we have with us Diane, the public procurement and the UN procurement, particularly WFP, and the labeling. That's already Jess mentioned. Sorry, I needed to say that because I think it's very important.
Absolutely, and I'm sure Diane would like to put a comment on that, but I'd really like to know also if you would put your 1 billion Swiss francs somewhere. Otherwise, I take it back.
I think Jess's point is incredibly important, and we cannot be mistaken by thinking there is only one solution. There's a lot of areas that need investment. One of the areas that I think we've got to be the most careful about in these choices that we're making is the impact on farmers. Because for a farmer to transition takes at least 2 to 3 years, and they only have generally 1, maybe 2 points of income throughout the course of their year. That is a very different business model than any of the big private sector companies have, and we have to respect those choices when we're pushing expectations down to the farm level about improving regenerative practices and about diversifying crops without at the same time opening up market access and funding for the transitions that are there. So starting at farm is a very strong place for us to begin with those types of investments. But there is a real credit towards the type of investments that allow for evening the playing field, be it through taxation or other policy drivers that allow the same changes to be made across an entire sector by requirement. That's also a very powerful motivator.
So we saw that Nestle put $1 billion behind regenerative farming
For example.
Last year.
For example,
yeah.
yep.
Okay. Pete, I know you're going to spend this money. Will it be on reducing food waste, feeding the world, moving more to plant-based proteins or regenerative farming? Where will it be, Pete?
Well, I'm not quite sure if the $1 billion can buy that, but I would still go for a global carbon tax. That would be a total game changer, not only for the food systems in terms of level playing fields of different producers and change the patterns of the value chain. It will also have a huge impact, of course, on our mobility. So the multiplier is huge. Although I would say, sustainable food system is not only about climate change. It is also, but it is also about fair, producers and inequalities that we have.
Yeah.
So we would still need a mechanism that I can get a mango on Christmas from a small farm somewhere in Africa. So we need to have exceptions to that. But if one magic wand, and what I would like to see at least in the next 10 years, I'm still at work, I would like to witness what happens
around the climate. Because the food system, yes, it's the global climate crisis, but it's also the global human health crisis with more and more people getting obese, or 2 billion, and more not having the access, another 2 billion not having access to nutritious food, and diabetes going up and so on. So we have a lot on our shoulders in the food system. A final question maybe here with 7 votes from Aisha. How much of a problem or not is the domination of a very small number of corporations in global food production? Given this domination, how much space is there for driving change through other means? See Agropoly by Berne Declaration, which I do not know, but maybe any of you do. I think maybe, Diane, you can start this one and then we can pass it on to your colleague. So is it a problem, or is there a change? We see so many startups coming up successfully. What's happening here?
So I think that it's been really well identified that there are I wouldn't say an incredibly small, but a very specific number of large global food companies, global traders, and global processors who have an outsized footprint in the global food system. That is where a lot of the work needs to start, and is in fact starting. And a lot of those companies are members of WBCSD, the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, and so we have that opportunity to be working with them at the forefront of how they're embedding sustainability into their strategies. We see more of what's happening before it comes forward, but there have not been the shifts across the entire investment portfolios that I think a lot of groups are pushing for. That doesn't underestimate the level of the changes when we're talking about a very heavy infrastructure related to global supply chains. Taking those types of shifts, diversifying the ingredients, shifting the portfolios, having a local competition that keeps up with those changes, and being able to make sure that we're bringing the citizens along with those choices, because we don't want to put all the pressure into citizen choices, all stems from having some strong leaders out in front showing what's possible, what really good performance looks like, and then leading by example to bring others along with on that journey.
Yeah, and with a big reach.
With a big reach, absolutely.
Good. It's approaching 6:30 p.m. here in Geneva, and I would like everybody to join me in a huge applause and thank you to our panel, to Ismael and Jessica and Diane and Pete. Thank you so much. Wow, wow, what a mouthful, wisdom and knowledge here, and everybody go and roll up the sleeves tomorrow. I would like now to invite the co-lead of the Global Program for Food Security from SDC, who have set up this session up here and share their key insights from this session. Please welcome Carmen Tennyson and Marie-Laure Quetta.
Thanks a lot, everyone, to still be with us. I don't know for you, but these 2 hours went very quickly. A big thanks to our team who organized everything behind the scene, to get the field visit in Tanzania, to get the panelists, the fantastic moderator, the pitch of Senegal and Vietnam. It's a lot of work behind and many months, and a big applause to Carmen, Bruce, Alessandra, and the rest of the team. So I think a general consideration from this afternoon discussion is that we are currently not only facing a climate crisis, but we are into a more general climate of crisis, in plural, with deteriorating conditions in many sectors: agriculture, health, finance, energy. The pandemic, ongoing conflict, economic downturns are all intertwined and reinforcing each other's. These crises are certainly not new, but they are more acute today. But we know all they've been ongoing for at least a couple of decades. In this context, we've heard from our speaker how our current unsustainable food systems are contributing to climate change, but also how they can become essential contributors to the solutions. Carmen, you just returned from Kenya, where you visited one of our new project called Nutrition in City Ecosystem, NICE. Can you share with us some thoughts on the challenges that our partner face in the field on how to implement a food system approach?
Yes, thank you very much, Marie-Laure. First of all, I have to underline that this systems approach to food is definitely an important tool, but it is really new and it is challenging to apply to specific national and regional levels. We all seem to have a tendency to immediately focus on the production and the agricultural sector when we hear about food. We still have some work to do to understand better the consumer's individual situations and needs. Too often people, policies, standards and projects focus on the sector-specific goals, resulting in silo work. It is not easy to apply a system thinking to reach core benefits in terms of nutrition and environmental sustainability goals. So last week I was in Kenya and I visited also a multi-stakeholder platform where in a county, and it was in Bungoma County, and all the different stakeholders were present, at least the stakeholders within the government. So we had not only agriculture, we had health, we had environment, and we had education. And I was definitely amazed about the collective intelligence gathered around a common challenge, and how, when we think about a common challenge, they came up with ideas how each of them could contribute. And it made me very optimistic. But it is an effort. It is definitely an effort to connect the dots to make a difference. Finally, I have to underline that it is not the systems to underline that systems don't contribute to more sustainable and healthy life. It is the people. So we need to make sure that all stakeholders are capacitated and empowered to contribute. Smallholder farmers, individual consumers or citizens, public and private researchers, international, national and subnational policymakers, employees of small and medium enterprises and multinational companies, traditional leaders and youth representatives. But Marie-Laure, this convening role can actually be, is a role of the international cooperation, isn't it?
Yeah, I think definitely. This is what we try to do. For instance, in our SDC Global Program Food Security, the team that organized this workshop this afternoon, we have the big advantage to be able to work at the very local level, engaging at country level, understanding local dynamics, and at the same time be very present at the international policy development level, with the Rome-based agencies, with the CFS, with the different Switzerland key multilateral partners, trying to facilitate a dialogue, as it was mentioned by Peter earlier on. I think in addition to that, we have a long tradition of contributing to multi-stakeholder platform. This is really within SDC ways of working and culture. And we've been doing that for many years, and we will continue to do that at different levels. You mentioned what we do in Kenya at the city level, but we do that, of course, with international networks, being, for instance, the International Land Coalition or the Scaling Up Nutrition, the SUN movement, where we always try to have all the different voices and sector on board. And of course, for us, the UN Food System Summit last year was a very important moment. And from the summit are now a coalition to action being formed. And Switzerland is engaging very much in two of them, agroecology and healthy diet. So the Coalition on Healthy Diet from Sustainable Food System, as reflected in its name, actually adopts this challenging systemic approach to food, connecting sustainable production with healthy, diverse, and safe nutrition, and bringing together communities that were not always talking to each other. But I think we try, and we hope in the future to really have agriculture, environment, health, biodiversity, and climate people coming together. To do that, we need another type of climate, the climate of trust. And we think that citizens need to trust their governments to be accountable for protecting their human rights to food and also the human rights to healthy and clean environment. Consumers, I need to have it somewhere, need to trust companies to label and price products transparently, both in terms of their health and environmental impact. At the same time, companies need to trust the reliability of supply chain and of the regulatory framework. And finally, government need to trust companies to respect their obligation and to contribute to societal well-being.
And yes, and we need to trust that we can change something. We probably did not provide easy, ultimate solutions this afternoon, but I think that we have underlined once more that the various food system stakeholders, along with the health and climate stakeholders, have resolutely stepped into a climate of change. We hope that most of you in the room and online were able to harvest some ideas and thoughts to fuel this change momentum in your daily work and maybe in your daily life. To conclude, a huge thanks to our speakers for sharing their insights, to our moderator, for she did a wonderful job, and a grateful thanks to all participants here in Geneva and online across the world for your keen interest and contributions. We are looking forward to continuing this conversation in future. Thank you very much.
So I only have left to say thank you from my side for leaning forward and engaging. That was really fun with the Slidos. For everybody in this room, there will be some refreshment outside, an opportunity to network. Please take that opportunity. And for everybody online, you will also have an opportunity to network because we have prepared some tools for you here. Now, the first one, the knowledge wall, is both for people in the room and the virtual ones to use the QR code to get on the Miro board and exchange and share your thoughts here. The IC Forum website is also for everybody to go in and share your innovative idea. The last one, the spatial chat, that's for you joining virtually. You can go in there, you will be live, your face will be there, you can meet other people who, like you, are exploring, maybe even an expert, or indeed not going on holidays tomorrow, but rolling up the sleeves and being a part of building this very complex, very diverse solutions, because we need all hands on deck. We have a window of opportunity now to change the food system to a sustainable one. So again, thank you and have a really good evening, and see you tomorrow for day 2 here at the IC Forum. Thank you.